Productive? Productive's a word. I forgot productive was a word. Hi, and welcome to Author's Note.
Don't listen.
My name is Cass.
And my name is Teese.
Welcome to Tuesdays. It's our second Tuesday. Tuesday? There's Tuesday again? No problem.
No problem.
My friend didn't know what that meme was.
Wow. One of my coworkers didn't know what "this is fine" was the other day. And he was like, that's a white people meme. I was like, no, it's universal.
I feel a little white people. No, it's universal.
I think everybody feels that way.
Yeah. I ended up watching, this is very off topic, but I ended up watching and finding a new YouTube channel through this, and I think his name might be just like, I need to check this. I need to make sure I get this right, because I don't want to say J.D. Salinger, and then it's like not J.D. Salinger.
You mean like the author, J.D.
Yeah.
Salinger?
It's, I started watching FD Signifier on YouTube, who has some really amazing essays, and I watched his essay on Bo Burnham's Inside.
Oh, that was recommended to me.
Yeah, white liberal performative existential dread, which is a really fascinating concept where he talks about how white people seem to give into this idea of nihilism much more quickly because for them, this idea that the world is broken and working against them is something that is relatively new to them in the Eurocentric space, right?
Okay.
And the American-centric space. It's a really great video. I highly recommend. I'll include a link to it down below.
Okie dokie.
It's a really great video. I recommend his stuff a lot. It's really
Nice.
entertaining. It's
Nice.
very casual and sort of off the cuff while being well researched.
Oh,
So,
I love that. That's really fun.
yeah. Teese, how are you doing this week?
I'm okay. A lot has been going on behind the curtain for good old Teese, but I did have time to consume some media, so that's a win for the gamerverse, I guess.
What have you been watching? What have you been reading? What have you been playing?
I watched *Malignant* last night.
Tell me about it. Tell me
Oh
all
my
about it.
god. Oh my god. Oh. So, truth be told, yesterday I was at a bachelorette party. So I crawl into my home and I guess I just wasn't fully sober. So I ordered some McDonald's and I watched *Malignant*, and that was a movie. It's like really poorly paced and it jumps around a lot, but I also just couldn't tell if that was just me coming down from the residual hell that I was partaking in. But then the second half, it was strong. Like the second half was good. So I don't know. It was like a solid 3. I'm gonna like a 3 out of 5. It was a solid 3 out of 5.
Okay, that's not bad.
Because I was like, okay, this is like it. Because you know me, got that letterbox brain. So I was like, it's probably like a 2.5, I'd say. And then by like the second half, as it was ending, I was like, you know what? Second half really pulled in that last half star. It's a 3 for me, dog. So I had a fun time. What about you, Cass? What's new with you in the Cassverse?
I watched the first season of The Circle, and I was delighted by it.
Really?
I had a really hard time conceptualizing how that show would work, and it's a social media reality show from
I know
Netflix.
nothing about it. All I know is that it's a Netflix show about social media. That's it.
Yeah, so, I mean, these people are held in basically sequestered solitude, which, rings fun and thematic for where we're at, and they can only engage via this social media application. But there were some genuinely really likable and fun people. I won't spoil who the winner was, but it's a very fun reality show, and I enjoyed it because there were quite a lot of people who are going into it with a much more positive mindset and trying to make friends and, establishing bonds of loyalty and alliance through friendship as opposed to like duplicitousness. It was the people who were trying to play each other or really sort of work the game a little too much who ended up getting voted out because people immediately were like, I don't really trust you. So it was
Nice.
fun. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll watch that.
Yeah. And there's
Christina
more
literally
seasons, so I'm
recommended it.
excited to watch more.
Yeah, Christina literally recommended it to me today, so.
Also, I caught up on What We Do in the Shadows, and I'm very
How you
excited.
feeling?
I love it. I
I'm
love it so much.
I love it. It's so good. It's a fave.
Bureaucratic Naja is perhaps my favorite thing in the world
Naja
right now.
is going to start the Vampiric Council prison experiment.
She really is.
I love it. Love it for her. I loved the kickball scene in the most recent episode too. It was really funny.
They really got the license for Supermassive Black Hole. They really did it. So
good for them. I'm so
happy.
Me too.
Teese.
Cass.
Have you heard of the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV with an expanded free trial, which you can play through the entirety of A Realm Reborn and the award-winning Heavensward expansion up to level 60 with no free time restrictions on playtime?
Yes, I did know. As a matter of fact, I sure did. Why do you ask?
Because today we're talking about the wild and crazy mass migration of World of Warcraft players over to Final Fantasy XIV, what has led to that, and kind of the weird things that have been happening in Final Fantasy XIV because of it, and what got us here.
Yay!
So anyone familiar with either of these two properties probably has heard about this right now, or you may have tangentially seen some of it on your timeline because it is unprecedented in every possible way. In the year of our Lord Hydaelyn and Zodiark Pick Your Poison 2021, Final Fantasy XIV has seen an unprecedented influx of players, and largely those players are coming from World of Warcraft. Both of those games are MMORPGs or Mamorpigs, and Yeah, Mamorpigs.
I've never heard anybody say that before.
Mamorpigs.
Mamorpigs. I'm going to start using that now. Oh, delightful.
Are you a big Mamorpig player?
No, yeah. Me trying to make friends. Are you a Mamorpig player?
Adopts a pet pig, names him Mamor. This is my Mamorpig.
This is my little man, Mamor. He's a pig.
I understand that not everybody who listens to our podcast is a gamer, which, that's cool. That's fine. And not everybody who's a gamer is a Mamorpig gamer. And listen, I'm saying Mamorpig because it's fun. I understand that most people don't say Mamorpig, but there's just enough people that say Mamorpig that I'm now obsessed with saying, and probably what I'm going to say for the rest of the episode.
Me too.
So, if you are unfamiliar, MMORPG stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. The traditional MMORPG has a large, persistent overworld in which players can actively run around, interact with one another, work together, or pursue quests entirely on their own. MMORPGs are, by nature, social games, and to experience all of the content of those games, you'll usually have to work with other players. The games, admittedly, are more fun with friends, whether you make them because of the game or because you drag your friends into it with you. In the case of Final Fantasy XIV, there are almost always people advertising their free companies, think like in-person or in-game clubs, in-game for people to join to make new friends to do content with.
Guilds.
That's kind of what an MMORPG is, right? And normally we think of them as being these big powerhouse PC games that are exclusive to sitting at the desktop with your RGB LED gamer lights flashing all around you in the dark of your room with your Monster Energy drink to the side and you're clicking on your little mechanical keyboard. That's kind of the vision we get when we talk about MMORPGs. Before we talk about Final Fantasy XIV, we're going to talk about World of Warcraft. So we're going to start with the veritable mountain spring before we get to the watershed that it has caused. Okay. World of Warcraft released in 2004, and it was developed and published by Blizzard. It's available to play on Windows and Mac operating systems exclusively. There is a slated release, I believe, for PlayStation 5 or for Xbox. I neglected to check on that, but there's a slated release for console games. Teese, do you know anything about World of Warcraft?
The pandemic.
Okay.
I know you raid with your guild at certain times. I know that there's a panda themed expansion,
There is, yeah.
but that's really it. I don't know
Hmm.
that much about World of Warcraft. I never played it. I had family who did. I have friends who
Hmm.
play currently, but besides that, I got nothing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people either know pretty much that level of information about World of Warcraft, or they know
Okay.
too much about World of Warcraft.
Sounds about right.
But Teese did mention we have an episode on the World of Warcraft in-game pandemic that the CDC still studies today, which is a really fascinating thing that happened. It's a real life digital pandemic that happened, and it's actually really cool to learn about. I would highly recommend checking out that episode.
Yeah.
So, World of Warcraft takes place roughly 4 years after the events of Warcraft 3, The Frozen Throne, which was a real time strategy game. World of Warcraft takes place in the larger Warcraft universe, building off of its lore and expanding it. So, since its initial release in 2004, World of Warcraft has had 8 expansions. It had the Burning
Damn.
Crusade in 2007, Wrath of the
Mm-hmm.
Lich King in 2008, Cataclysm in 2010, Mists of Pandaria in 2012, Warlords of Draenor in 2014, Legion in 2016, Battle for Azeroth in 2018, and Shadowlands in 2020.
Ah,
That's a lot of content,
it is
ostensibly. But apparently, some of those expansions are really thin and lacking, and we'll come back to that.
interesting.
I personally have not
Yes.
played World of Warcraft since Cataclysm in 2010. I
Okay.
admittedly remember very little, and I will be honest, gamers. The game was only entertaining to me when I was playing it with friends because I don't really enjoy the very fetch quest driven nature of World of Warcraft storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
For a very long time, and still kind of to this day, World of Warcraft did not have cutscenes. It didn't have a really rich sense of player integration into the story. You know, you got those big, beautiful opening cinematics that came with each expansion pack, but the game doesn't look anything like those. The
Mm-hmm.
game does
Mm-hmm.
not look like the Warcraft movie.
No. Oh
Yeah.
God. Yeah, I forgot that existed. Oof. Oh.
I think for a very long time, and still to this day, World of Warcraft is great for people who love farming for achievements, getting trophies, and it's good for people with friend groups in the game. But I was a younger player when I was playing it who didn't get involved with the community and so didn't really enjoy the fullness of the game for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's also uncomfortable playing as like a preteen and teenager and using a female avatar and getting hit on by older men who want to erotic role play with you and you're like,
Ew.
listen, I'm just running around with my little pet wolf, I want to collect things.
Oh, ew. Unnecessary.
More pigs are very much made and broken by their communities, which can be a benefit and it can be something that leads to really toxic environments.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say before we get further into the episode, this episode is not meant to come down on either side of one of these games is better than the other. I don't think they're comparable. I really don't think they're comparable. And yes, I'm obviously going to have favoritism towards Final Fantasy XIV because that's what I play, but I also understand that like World of Warcraft has its place and it is a really fun and engaging game for
Mm-hmm.
many people.
There's
It's
a
just
reason why
not for
people still
me.
play it. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a reason it's the most successful Pig and has been for so long.
Yeah, exactly.
According to a 2014 study by Thomas de Beauvais, Christina V. Lopez, Nikki, and Nicholas Dochenal, about 10% of World of Warcraft players leave every month, with about 5% of previously left players returning, which means there's about a 5% net loss of players every month. That's totally normal. There's nothing really
Yeah.
startling or wild about that. Most MMORPGs obviously see big returns and boosted player entry whenever new content releases, so that's whenever you're getting something like a new expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Chilton, who was the lead game designer of World of Warcraft at the time, actually believed that Blizzard had inadvertently shot themselves in the foot by essentially training their players to churn through content at such a rapacious pace, not taking time to relax, explore, or take a break from the game. He feels like they trained their players to look for quest markers, go to them, fill them out, and not really pay attention or stop to read what they were actually doing.
Mm.
In that 2014 study, they actually found that lack of content was not the reason that players were leaving the game. And Chilton believed that it was largely burnout that players left because of. For purpose of comparison, bear with me here, World of Warcraft does not, like Final Fantasy XIV, have a linear series of quests which bring players through the story of the game. Rather, World of Warcraft, like any MMORPG, has different areas and zones, and those areas and zones might have an overarching story that players can work through and discover by doing miscellaneous quests, but it's not something where you're doing necessarily one quest at the beginning of that area and it'll take you on like a little tour through it. You're picking up things and piecing them together. And completing certain quests will unlock others, obviously, but it is not the same deal of Final Fantasy XIV where you're following, a nice little guardrail.
Mm-hmm.
According to MMO Population, World of Warcraft has an estimated 116.8 million total players. That includes individuals who at one point played and no longer do, as well as people with multiple accounts. Additionally, as of September 2021, World of Warcraft is estimated to have a 3.3 million player per day average, but that population is actively dropping. Now, we're going to pivot over into the Final Fantasy XIV history time. There are a lot of, I'm saying this anecdotally, there are a lot of arguments that I see happen in Final Fantasy XIV in chat of players arguing which game is better and how Final Fantasy XIV wouldn't exist without World of Warcraft, which is true.
Yeah.
Again, I don't really think the games are comparable, and I don't think those conversations are even remotely productive, and I will come back to that. For anyone who's not familiar with Final Fantasy as a property and is a little overwhelmed by the idea of there being 14 games, before we get any deeper into this,
there's even more.
I want to clarify for people that Final Fantasy XIV is not 14th in one linear story. Final Fantasy is just a really wide, expansive universe in which its games usually don't have any relation to each other except for recurring names and creatures. I don't know why Square Enix has chosen to do this, but they do, and this is the world we live in, and if you cannot accept there are like 800 different Spider-Man, then you can't accept this either. We're just gonna have to take this and roll with it. Final Fantasy XIV is not a sequel to Final Fantasy XIII. They're not related to each other. Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 was developed and published by Square Enix, and the current Final Fantasy XIV obviously is as well. The game was released in 2010, so that's 6 years after World of Warcraft, on Windows exclusively. The game had been in development since 2005, and brought over many aesthetic elements from Square Enix's previous MMORPG, Final Fantasy XI. Up to 400 server crashes would occur per day, and the game's new director, who just sort of had the project dumped into his lap only after its initial launch and failure, Naoki Yoshida, often called Yoshi P by fans, pointed to 3 key factors for the game's failure. I can't convey to you how badly Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 failed. It had like a 43 or 48 on Metacritic. People did not like it. Yoshi P believed the team had a really unhealthy obsession with graphical quality. Teese, could you read this quote from Polygon for us?
Yes. Yoshida showed a screenshot of a flower pot outside of an inn in the first form of Final Fantasy XIV. He called it the loveliest flower pot in an MMO, but then revealed its heavy cost. That single flower pot contained over 1,000 polygons and 150 lines of shader code, meaning it took up as many resources as a single player character. What? What?
Yeah.
What?
Especially when we're talking about indie games today, a flower pot having over 1,000 polygons sounds ludicrous. So the idea that they were working on this with an MMO. Teese, you have played a little bit of Final Fantasy XIV in its current state.
Yes.
Graphically,
Yes.
where would you say it falls for you in terms of just overall quality as compared to maybe like other AAA games today?
It's a fucking MMO. Like, there's too many people in there to even think about graphics.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say it's like a 6,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. It still looks really nice from far away. Your characters can still be modded to look a certain way that you could tell them all apart. They can still look cute. I know there's like a lot of modding opportunities. I mean, it looks better than Skyrim.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Mm-hmm.
good way to put it. It looks better than Skyrim.
Yeah, and that's Teese's experience from early game and later game. Textures improve, environments, they really learn how to work it, but, you know,
I was so afraid. I was
I
so scared.
understand. Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Yoshi P also noted that the team had a lack of MMO experience and knowledge, and additionally, people have really come to expect these rich archetypal stories from Final Fantasy as a series. Final Fantasy 14 1.0 didn't have one. It did not have this like very hero's journey that so many other games that Square Enix has come out with have. Square Enix had a very firm and stubborn belief that every problem they had with 1.0 could be patched. If you're not familiar with what the term patch means, think of it like home improvement. If a game is a constructed home, then a patch can be anything from a literal patch of the drywall to an expansion of the house. But if the actual bones of your house, the very foundation that it sits on, is failing, no amount of filled holes, refinished tiles, or pretty new sunrooms are going to save you.
Mm.
Yoshi P had to completely restructure the entire approach the team was taking when it came to Final Fantasy XIV.
God.
The game had to be entirely rebuilt from the ground up. Alongside that, they continued creating content for 1.0 while they rebuilt. MMOs
That's
are
just a
expected.
mess.
Right, okay. It's
It's like you can't build something when it has a shitty foundation. It won't last. It
yeah.
just won't. It'll crumble. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
no, no.
But they were really concerned with earning back the trust of people, and they thought it was really unfair that people who bought into 1.0 were just going to get
Mm-hmm.
dropped like that. So they wanted to make sure that they were continuing to bring them new content, even though they knew 1.0 was going to get destroyed eventually.
Okay.
MMOs are expected to have an absolutely hysterical bevy of content upon their release. Included on Yoshida's full list of standard mandatory features that they had to have were things like login server stability, they needed to have highly customizable characters, he needed there to be endless gear options for people, there needed to be fully fleshed out quest lines and public group quests. Those were just a few of the things, but that list he had was pages and pages long. He also made sure that less experienced staff were forced to play 1.0 over and over and over again to make sure that they understood the team's decisions, why they were making them, and so that those team members were then really focused on what the actual gameplay experience was like. When we talk about game design in general, there's a concept called game feel, which is just like how a game feels to play. And if a game isn't fun, if it isn't rewarding, if it isn't engaging, you're a hell of a lot less likely to come back to it. I think Hades, if you know, that's a relatively familiar title for a lot of people. Hades is a really great example of game feel because that game feels so responsive. Zagreus moves so well, despite dying over and over and over again, and the loop of a roguelike being quite frustrating by nature, you still come back to that game. You want to keep playing it because it feels good. The rewards flesh out. It works very well in and of itself. Community between the fans and the players is also a really huge part of Final Fantasy XIV even today. And after the really disastrous launch of 1.0, Square Enix had work to do in recovering their fans' trust. Teese, can you read this quote again from Polygon?
Yes, I can. While some question the need to continue updating the original Final Fantasy XIV while working on its replacement, Yoshida felt it was important to earn back the trust of players who had bought into the first game. Those updates also allowed them a testing ground for new features and ideas as they worked to solidify the standards in A Realm Reborn. Another important part of Yoshida's process was reaching out to the community. He said that, for as much as he might not believe him, he and his team actually read the Final Fantasy XIV forums obsessively and actively discuss and implement fan feedback. In addition to internal updates, Yoshida began a regular live stream during the development of A Realm Reborn, which helped connect fans to the game and also fostered motivation for the team. Square Enix management thought it was risky to be so open about development to fans, but the players loved it so much that Yoshida and his crew are still doing live streams now.
When we talk about how responsive the Final Fantasy XIV development crew is to fans, I think something that immediately comes to mind and is very recent is that there's been the announcement of a new class coming in the upcoming expansion. And that class's job symbol, a bunch of people came forward and said, hey, the cluster formation in this job symbol is triggering my trypophobia. Is there any way we can change it? They changed it. It was one little thing. It was just this little icon. But people were really bothered by it, and it made the game uncomfortable for them to play. And the devs were like, this is a really easy fix. We can do that. That's no problem. Let us know if this works for you. Stuff like that is just, it's beautiful. And there are
We
always
love
going
to
be
see it.
people are always going to make silly little demands, or they're going to ask for things that just wouldn't work in the game. And so it's always going to be a question of like, will this actually work? Will this benefit our game? Will it hurt it? And it's a value judgment. But the dev team has always been super responsive. You can tell they listen to the community. Yoshida jokes later on in the interview that Teese read from that comparing Final Fantasy XIV at that stage to World of Warcraft is like comparing a child entering elementary school to a college student. Oh, how the turntables. Oh,
Jeez.
how the turntables.
Oh no, I'm so scared.
So Final Fantasy XIV relaunched as Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn in 2013. That's 3 years later. It released on Windows and PlayStation 3, and in 2014 on PlayStation 4.
Yeah.
A Realm Reborn takes place 5 years after the events of 1.0, and we actually have some really incredible footage from 1.0 players of the final days leading up to server shutdown. Ominous music plays throughout the entire world. The admins of the game were allowed to spawn in enemy monsters wherever they wanted, which led to this event that is referenced now in Final Fantasy of the Great Gooble Wall. And it's really fun. I really like it. The moon loomed ever and ever closer, or rather a comet loomed ever and ever closer. It's really haunting when you see that footage. The sky has a very sort of red cast to it. 1.0 players actually got a special exclusive to them starting cutscene for A Realm Reborn. They got some additional dialogue from NPCs, and their characters have a special tattoo which marks their sort of uber veteran status. I think that's so cool. It's so much fun. You
really
see
nice.
somebody run through the game and they have one of those tattoos, and you're like, oh my god, they've been playing since 1.0. It's really cool. There's lore built into it. I think that's so much fun and so exciting.
Yeah, I love that. It's actually really cool. I'm here for that.
Yeah. A Realm Reborn.
A little gift. Just a gift. Just
a little
gift.
fun way to say like, hey, you stuck with us when we really fucking sucked. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
I believe people who've been playing since 1.0 actually also get a discounted price on their subscription, but don't quote me on that one. A Realm Reborn is the entry story for players today. It has seen patches and streamlining, but it has largely stayed the same in its core story. So, like, some quests got culled, they got shortened down so that it wasn't quite as exhaustive for people to get through. Final Fantasy XIV has released 3 expansions since its reboot. We have Heavensward in 2015, Stormblood in 2017, Shadowbringers in 2019, and Endwalker is slated for release on November 23rd of this year. And you know I'm so fucking excited for that. While I can't speak to World of Warcraft, I can say that between the large expansion releases, Final Fantasy XIV releases new patches regularly to transition storylines and keep adding content in between. I know that World of Warcraft releases patches. I don't know how rich they are in story. Final Fantasy XIV patches are usually quite dense. There's at least, like, if you're only doing those quests, it's normally at least a day to a day and a half, sometimes 2 days worth of game content. And I'm talking like 12 plus hours of playing the game.
That's pretty juicy, I'd say.
Yeah, and that's just free. So if you already have the expansion, you get those. And sometimes I feel like it's normally, there's like 5 or 6 patches between, at minimum, between your expansions. So Final Fantasy XIV is about story. The core of this game is a deep, lore-steeped story exploring politics, faith, the origins of man, and the dynamic struggle between the natural world and technology, which are all things, if you're familiar with Final Fantasy as a property, series, IP, those are all things they all tend to deal with. It is a time-honored classic that we all know and love from JRPGs, which is attack and dethrone God. It's everyone's favorite thing to do. Final Fantasy XIV has a thread of quests that bring players through the world and story in a linear fashion. Unlike World of Warcraft, where at level 1, day 1, you can ostensibly get yourself into endgame areas, Final Fantasy XIV has regions which can't be accessed until certain points of the story have been met. When I say endgame areas for World of Warcraft, I mean high-level stuff. I feel like a really good example, unironically, is Griffin's Peacecraft playthrough that he did for Polygon, where he has a no-kill run of World of Warcraft, and you can see him get into incredibly high-level areas despite being this tiny little gnome. Final Fantasy XIV's player count has risen and continued to rise since the relaunch of A Realm Reborn, and for a very long time, Final Fantasy XIV was one of the very few MMORPGs that was not only consistently growing its player base, but retaining that player base. According to MMO population, Final Fantasy XIV has a total of 32.9 million total players, so that's less than a third of World of Warcraft's. Again, that includes people who have previously played the game and left, and people with multiple accounts, etc. But fast approaching World of Warcraft in numbers, as of September 2021, Final Fantasy XIV has an estimated 3.13 million players every day. It is a little difficult to convey the next part in an audio medium, but Teese, could you talk about the differences in these two charts here? They're graphs that chart the player population of each game over 5 years.
World of Warcraft has bumps and moments, which I assume would be around the time when new expansions came out. But after the expansion comes out, it does drop pretty severely. But with Final Fantasy XIV, it is just a steady incline all the way up. And there's very little dropping, if at all. So it's pretty impressive. It's way more steady incline than World of Warcraft's ever has been.
I think it's very telling that World of Warcraft has over, what is it, like 100 million registered users, and they're only getting like 3.3 million playing every day, whereas Final Fantasy 13 has about 10% of its total players.
That's what I was going to say. Isn't that 10%? That's incredible. Like, oh my God.
Yeah. At their core, again, I think comparing Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft is inherently unfair. It's very much apples and oranges. They're two very different games that just both happen to be MMORPGs. But in the recent weeks of 2021, World of Warcraft players have poured into Final Fantasy in a veritable deluge. You cannot make a massive, intricate game like these that will be for everyone. In attempting to appeal to everyone, you're going to end up appealing to no one. It's okay for you to dislike one or both of these games. There's nothing wrong with that. If you are a World of Warcraft player, I welcome you to this episode. I'm not trying to shit on the game you love at all. And I would hope that you don't shit on the game that I love. I think both games have merits, and like, I did really enjoy WoW for a time. It's just not my thing anymore. And also, let's be honest, a huge part of that is my friends play Final Fantasy XIV. I don't have friends who play World of Warcraft. I used to, but I don't anymore. They all stopped playing. Den of Geek has a pretty succinct breakdown on what makes these two games at their core so vastly different, while highlighting some of the areas where World of Warcraft feels like it's lagging, if not entirely falling behind. Teese, could you read this for us?
Can do. Final Fantasy XIV's combat is based around fairly intricate combos, whereas many World of Warcraft classes rely on comparatively simple skill rotations. Final Fantasy XIV makes its leveling and questing process more of an adventure, whereas the retail version of World of Warcraft often treats leveling and questing like a seemingly necessary evil. Final Fantasy XIV finds ways to make most of its classes feel unique, while WoW sometimes struggles to balance its classes in a way that encourages true group diversity. Final Fantasy XIV even offers compelling main and side stories at the time when WoW is being heavily criticized for a series of controversial narrative decisions that have left fans feeling that WoW's once epic universe is more muddled than ever.
Obviously, that review is slated in favor of Final Fantasy XIV, but if we take out some of the bias, I do think it kind of rings true to this idea of like, I've seen people argue that like World of Warcraft is for more hardcore gamers and that Final Fantasy XIV is baby easy mode, but then I've also watched those same people play Final Fantasy XIV on stream and they're being carried by the rest of their party because they don't understand what they're doing because they haven't taken the time to learn the game that they're playing. Both of these games do have a subscription model, so I want to compare those a little bit so people get an idea of how how the developers and the production teams sort of look to their player base and expect them to sustain them. It is a little bit, I don't want to say controversial, but it is this very difficult idea to have an MMORPG that is subscription based as opposed to one that's maybe free to play with in-app purchases. And I know that when Yoshi P was talking about Final Fantasy XIV, he was like, listen, it needs to be a subscription model so that we can continually work on things reliably as opposed to trying to bait people with in-game purchases to sustain ourselves. And listen, both of these games have cosmetic options that you can pay for. But as long as you buy the expansion, you don't need to pay for any of those cosmetic things. I have paid for cosmetic things. I love to have my fancy little mounts that I paid money for. They make me feel special. I like to look at them. They make me very happy. If you can spend money on a gacha game, I can spend money on this.
Amen. I feel that. Taste your bliss.
So, World of Warcraft players pay $14.99 US a month. They can also buy World of Warcraft tokens with in-game currency and redeem those for game time. Arguably, if you are a player with a ridiculous amount of gold, which is the in-game currency, those in-game tokens could be a great way to not have to actually pay cash for World of Warcraft, but I don't actually know how hospitable or sustainable the in-game economy is to that. I have seen players say they would have to spend the majority of their playtime simply grinding for that gold, so it doesn't work out in their favor. But I've also seen people who play the game for free this way and say it only takes them, like a day or two out of their week. But again, that is a question of how much time do you have. If you only have 1 day a week to play World of Warcraft, do you want to spend that grinding for gold? Final Fantasy XIV has 2 subscription options. At $12.99 US per month, you're limited to 1 character per world server, and you can have as many characters as you like. They just all have to be on different servers. Or you can pay $14.99 a month, where you can have as many little Catboys as you want all on 1 server, and many more. So, same cost as World of Warcraft if you want that unmitigated access to have as many Catboys as you want on the same world server.
That's so many Catboys.
But I want to talk about those free trials, Teese.
Okay.
So World of Warcraft's free trial allows players to play up to level 20 in a starting adventure called Exile's Reach. It does not allow players access to World of Warcraft Classic or World of Warcraft Vanilla, as it's sometimes called, which is the newly released World of Warcraft variant that takes the MMORPG back to its initial world appearance, stylings, and mechanics. There are also social limitations, and I think you're locked to the Exile's Reach area until you pay up, essentially. Final Fantasy XIV has an absolutely bonkers free trial to the point where it is now a meme.
It's a meme, alright.
It's a meme. Final Fantasy XIV allows players to bring themselves up to level 60 in all the job classes if they want, and gives them unfettered access to all quests and content in A Realm Reborn and Heavensward, the first expansion, for free. There are social limitations, such as the inability to join those player-created free companies, those little guilds or clubs, or have access to the market board, which is a space where players can buy and sell in-game items to each other. I don't play World of Warcraft anymore, and I haven't in a very long time. But every day that I play Final Fantasy XIV, I run into people playing on free trial who have poured in hundreds of hours of time because they enjoy themselves and they're able to get so much out of the game without ever having to pay for it. There are 18 different classes in Final Fantasy XIV, and I can tell you that they all play very differently. If you want to get to level 60 in all 18 of them, you can. No one can stop you. That's in the free trial. That's wild.
I've seen people take up to a year to hit level 60 on every single job. Like, imagine playing this game for free for a whole fucking year and still having stuff to do. Like, I don't even play Final Fantasy 14. I tried it for like 2 hours and I got too scared. But I will say, even I know, me, a more pig pleb, if you will, knows that this game has some good ass meat to it available for free.
Yeah. It's not an issue of finances necessarily that have been causing World of Warcraft to hemorrhage players. So what the fuck is happening? There is a part of this that I don't have outlined in my notes because I would rather not spend an exhaustive amount of time getting into it, so I'm going to mention it here briefly. In the midst of all of this, Blizzard, Activision, and EA have been hit with a terrifying class action lawsuit about the behavior and work culture at the company that has left many people disgusted by the company as a whole and not wanting to engage with any of their property anymore. That is a facet to this. There is a lot of journalism and a lot of discussion about that class action lawsuit. It is ongoing. You can go check it out. I encourage you to research it. The game industry needs to unionize. I'll move on. This arguably is perhaps the oddest time for Final Fantasy XIV to be seeing a player increase like it is. The game is sitting between expansions, which account for the beefiest editions of their content, and with the trickled patches in between, those only really work to tide over existing players. They're not usually used as something to get new players in. When a game sits in this sort of drooping hammock between expansions, that's often when we see players stop playing, pause their subs, or even jump over to new games in the meantime. That's part of what's happening here, but we're seeing it happen in the direction we didn't expect, which is World of Warcraft players coming to Final Fantasy en masse. World of Warcraft players are largely deeply frustrated with Blizzard for a variety of reasons. Part of that is the class action lawsuit I mentioned. Fans are exhausted and frustrated by the story, though. Sylvanas Windrunner has been the game's main antagonist for 2 expansions now, or about 3 years, and she has been a mess from the beginning. Her characterization is often nonsensical and contrived, and though Blizzard has promised again and again that all will make sense in time, a climactic cinematic that was released in July of 2021 in the 9.1 patch just seemed to further prove how ill thought out Blizzard's plotlines have been. Teese, would you read this quote from PC Gamer for us?
Yes. The official YouTube video of the cinematic currently has over 10,000 downvotes compared to the 4,000 upvotes. Meanwhile, the WoW subreddit is full of threads mocking the cinematic and World of Warcraft's obsession with what is widely regarded as one of its worst characters.
So, in an article for Polygon, Cass Marshall writes at length about their frustration with Blizzard's morning of the big due date homework copying of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They write, playing World of Warcraft right now can be a little rough. There are fantastic stories in the game, like Zandalar's Quest or the Zone of Revendreth, but the main narrative feels like it's held together around a few big moments that can be easily clipped into GIFs. Sure, it's super cool when the small cast of heroes fights the bad guys and fires off both rockets and one-liners, but it's also a sometimes food. Right now, World of Warcraft feels like everything is set up around those big moments in the form of cinematics and cutscenes. The main story is there to set up a series of really cool story beats with little regard for whether they make much sense. And when the story doesn't make sense, Blizzard will just patch up those parts with a tie-in book?
Can I have a question?
Yeah, go for it.
I was going to ask, in this sense, what is a cinematic? Would that just be a video released on YouTube? Is that like a big cutscene that
A
plays in the middle of the
cinematic
game?
in this case is it's a pre-rendered cutscene in the game.
Oh God.
So it's not
Okay.
even, a
Ugh.
lot of times, it's not even something that features your character at all. Unlike
Oh,
Final
boo.
Fantasy XIV, which the cinematics are the trailers for the expansions, and otherwise your character is kind of pretty front and center in pretty much every cutscene.
Nice.
I was reading this last night and I got really sad
Yeah.
for World of Warcraft
Oh.
players. I got really
Oh.
sad. Like, this sucks. It sucks to
Yeah,
have a
it
game you love
does.
so much that just doesn't seem to care about you or care as much about.
Oh
Just,
God,
yeah.
tell me about it. Tell me about it when you play a game for 20 years.
Final Fantasy XIV from the outset has posed your character as being the hero and the main character. And while that definitely changes over time, where you actually begin to become more integral to the story and seem to have more agency and power because you as a player have more understanding, World of Warcraft sort of starts you off as this like nothing grunt, and then suddenly you are all powerful, and it's just not congruent and it's not linear, and a lot of people don't feel like it works. Reading through all these articles and sifting through player stories, it seems like the general consensus is that World of Warcraft began its slow and painful descent into incomprehensibility and frustrating MacGuffins after Wrath of the Lich King. I've also seen people say that it's gone downhill since Warlords of Draenor. I've also seen people say it hasn't been good since Battle for Azeroth. Everyone's going to have their own personal cutoff date. While many would argue that this might be the effect of nostalgia goggles, reading through this, it feels to me like World of Warcraft has outgrown its own universe and they don't have any way of halting or even inhibiting their own power creep. It also seems like the game's writers have lacked a clear and decisive direction for a long time and are sort of laying down tracks under their own feet as the train comes shrieking up behind them, faster and faster without any stop in mind. There is a theory as well that this is a planned destruction, that they are sort of trying to slowly ramp down on World of Warcraft with intent to start anew. I don't know how credible that is. I don't think that's very likely, but who knows? Compared to all this, though, Final Fantasy XIV stories might be a little long, a little verbose and winding, but they're really masterfully worked to come full circle, tying in each new expansion with the one previous in a way that ups the ante, but never too much, and it continues to build upon established characters in ways that enrich them. The world around the player is always steeped in lore that they can discover if they choose, but there's a handy rail in the main story quests that provide guidance and structure, which introduces players into new mechanics and systems as the game progresses. Players of World of Warcraft are also really frustrated by the lack of content. World of Warcraft's 9.1 patch wasn't even a month old when the migration began in earnest, but players were really lukewarm on it. It featured a new area and a new raid, but it was 8 months of veritable silence before that patch dropped, and fans had already anticipated narratively what the patch was going to bring. Players felt like the patch's new content invalidated a lot of their endgame gear, that its overall content was really thin and lacking, and especially considering there had been an 8-month drought of content leading up to its release, they were really disappointed. I specifically remember people on my timeline getting really frustrated that Blizzard had chosen to limit this one cosmetic choice for player character covenants. I don't totally know what that means, but it meant that player characters were basically stuck wearing like a tabard or something for whatever covenant they had chosen, and a lot of people didn't like that because it's like, well, I want to wear the purple robe, but I'm stuck in the green robe now. I don't want this. I'm like, yeah, why would you
Hmm.
change something like that? Nobody asked you to.
Yeah, that's
They
weird.
also added in a cooldown system that people could not stand, and they ended up going back on it.
That's how you know it's real bad.
If you haven't been playing Final Fantasy XIV since the launch of A Realm Reborn consistently, there's almost always going to be something for you to do, and that something is often big swaths of content, entire storylines, or explorations of area that weren't even a part of the main story. Final Fantasy XIV doesn't abandon or hide its old content, or even make it obsolete because it's old content. Today, in 2021, I'm still playing content in Final Fantasy XIV that is from 2013. It's still just as fun, just as engaging, and just as challenging as the current newly released content. Additionally, Final Fantasy XIV almost always has some manner of event going on, and those events are thoughtful, they're fun, they have perks for new players and established ones, they have fun little stories or great bonuses to help players accrue everything from in game currency to festive items or even mounts. This summer, like a few weeks ago, I say this summer, but there's like dozens of events that happen during the summer, but our quote unquote summer event, everybody got a polar bear mount if they took part in it, and the polar bear mount is so cute. He's the cutest little butt, and he wiggles. It's so much fun. I love him.
Peanut butter
One
thing. Whatever that little man is.
One of the things that's really great about Final Fantasy XIV is how hospitable it is to new players with its system that basically there's like I don't want to get into the particulars of it, but there's basically a way that incentivizes like super established players to come back and play the super baby content, to play it with those new players, so those new players aren't stuck waiting for forever and ever and ever for people to join them on stuff. People are still always
Cute.
playing it with them.
Cute. Oh, I
Makes me
love
so
that.
happy.
That's really cool, actually. Oh, we love to see it.
Yeah. World of Warcraft streamers are also leaving their places in Azeroth to make new characters in the world of Eorzea, though. Asmongold. We cannot talk about this without talking about Asmongold. Asmongold, for anyone who isn't aware, because I wasn't aware until this was all happening and people were screaming in chat about this, is an established World of Warcraft streamer and perhaps the most popular World of Warcraft streamer. On July 3rd, he started playing Final Fantasy XIV on stream. He averaged approximately 200,000 viewers for that stream. That's so many people.
That's so many.
Since July, that's the average. That doesn't account for the peak number, that doesn't account for the lowest number.
No.
His
what's
stream
average?
was mobbed. Since July 3rd, his Twitch follower count has risen from 2 million to 2.4 million, and he has over
Wow.
800,000 subscribers on YouTube as of recording this mid-September. It's wild. His
Jeez.
first stream was kind of rough, and he was harassed persistently by griefers, either people creating characters to simply follow him around, some with the good intentions of like just wanting to see him and be a part of his little journey, or some with literal slurs for names. There was an
Yikes.
individual who rode around on a massive whale mount to prevent him from being able to more easily click on NPCs.
That sucks.
Don't fucking do that. Don't do that. Don't do any of that. That's so shitty. Please be nice to new people who are playing the game, especially streamers, because streamers are the way a lot of people get introduced to the game. And I understand. A lot of people were really scared that Asmongold was going to come in and shit on Final Fantasy XIV. But you know what the guaranteed way to get somebody to shit on a game is? Is if it has a shitty community who's not welcoming and accepting. We will come back to this. He logged on, and he sort of unintentionally broke Final Fantasy XIV.
Oh no.
Login queue times were exorbitantly high. I had friends whose place in the login queue was in the thousands or had literally just maxed out at like 9999999. They had to wait upwards of half an hour to get into the server because, surprise, Asmongold had chosen to play on their server and in their world. Limsa Lominsa, which is both a starting location and the most popular city-state for players to frequently drop in at, became totally inaccessible for a lot of people. Players had to attempt over and over to enter the city, only to be denied because it was overwhelmed by other players, and some of those other players were people who just wanted to follow Asmongold around. Listen, buddy, you want to be a part of the stream? Hang out in chat on Twitch. Don't just randomly follow him around. Limsa will lag on a good day, but Final Fantasy XIV was not prepared for the, no pun intended, horde that fell upon it. Final Fantasy XIV players were really fearful that Asmongold was going to come into the game, ignore what it attempted to teach and lead players through, and hate it and condemn the game. But Asmongold has been playing the story, learning as he goes, and he's acknowledged the privilege that being a large streamer has granted him, in that whenever he needs help, there's an entire community that's waiting to help him. He has also made it very clear that there have been many times in the past where he's stopped playing World of Warcraft for weeks and even months, and he's just enjoying grinding a new game. He doesn't hate World of Warcraft, he'll go back to it. But he's enjoying Final Fantasy XIV, and I've seen like a lot of clips of him playing. I didn't watch any of his streams prior. I didn't know who he was, but I've now seen clips of him playing, and it's really funny to watch somebody get this experience if he's like, oh, this gear sucks. Why would I want this gear? And then he tries it on, and he's like, I want this. It looks cool. And it's like, yeah, that's it. That's the game.
That's it. That's the game.
He seems like a really fun, chill dude. Yeah. Or he does what all of us do, and he looks at Y'shtola, and he's like, God, she's hot. And it's like, yeah, she really is. She's perfect.
Which one is that one? Do I know her?
Y'shtola is, I don't think you met Y'shtola, but I can show her to you.
I just want to look at her.
Yeah, she's perfect. I'll send you a picture. She's a kitty girl.
Oh, she is cute. Okay, I do. Oh, yeah. Bitches love her. She's a special little girl.
We do not deserve her.
Wow, we love a goth Lolita.
Truly. She doesn't start out that way, but she ends up that way.
Girl, don't we all just have our Lolita phase in our 20s? It's fine.
Other streamers not limited to World of Warcraft followed in Asmongold's footsteps. Streamers like Bellular Gaming, Jesse Cox, and more. And then we're going to talk about Quinn69 for a little bit. I didn't know who he was, but my friends told me to check him out when I was researching for this episode. So Quinn69 streams Path of Exile, World of Warcraft, and a bunch of other things, and he is perhaps the best example of a bad faith trial of Final Fantasy XIV. Quinn purchased a level skipped that brought his character up to level 70 right off the bat. If you are a new player, even if you are literally a professional world-ranked player in another game, as I believe Quinn69 is, I think you owe a game the time it takes to learn its mechanics. I'm not going to tell you that your fun is wrong, but I think if you are new to Final Fantasy XIV, it's a bad move to go and buy a level skip because you're hurting yourself. Final Fantasy XIV being a community game means that other players can and will rely on you to understand what you're doing and to work with them. It is hard to do that if you have bought yourself to the end of the line, and instead of gradually learning how abilities stack and work together, you are learning a dozen different things and trying to parse out what your duties are in any given raid, least of all what your rotation is. If what I just said is confusing to you in any way, shape, or form, congratulations. As part of what learning an MMO is learning about things like rotations, your raid duties, things like that. Those are like relatively simple things, but MMOs don't work like other games. We'll come back to this. Job or class quests in Final Fantasy XIV are also actually part of the story, and that story usually ties into the main story quest that potentially runs congruent with them, further expanding on the world in a really organic fashion. Teese, do you get the most out of a book when you read the first chapter and the last chapter and nothing else?
No. You're missing all the meat. That's no sandwich. That's just some bread.
Many viewers felt like Quinn went into Final Fantasy with the intent to prove that it was inferior to World of Warcraft, which, cool, if that's fun for you, I guess that's fine.
Yes, have fun being a hater.
It's kind of annoying.
Yeah.
He skipped dialogue, ignoring the story altogether, and he says in tweets that he read all the lore for 3 days, and we know he didn't because it's on stream. And I do feel kind of bad for him because anytime he was trying to read things, people were spamming the Bedge emote in chat, which is like a sleeping Pepe, signaling that they were bored. And it's like, okay,
cool.
But the other side of that is that you've created that community in your chat and it's your stream. If you want to read, You can literally, the amount of times I've been watching Jarvis Johnson stream and he starts whistling and people are like, oh my God, stop whistling. And he's like, if you don't like it, then leave. It's my stream.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to read, you know?
Yeah.
And if your viewers don't want that, then I understand. It's your job. You need to appeal to people on some level, but it's a value judgment. It's give and take.
Yeah.
Viewers who watched also pointed out that though he insisted in his tweets that quote-unquote savage level content wasn't engaging, he was actually being carried the entire time by far more experienced players. So, shade.
Seems like a liar.
Yeah, he quit playing after a few days, insisting that he didn't understand the hype, that it had a quote-unquote weeb aesthetic, it lacked character customization, and its PvP was non-existent. We are going to try and kindly ignore the racism that is shifting under that weeb aesthetic comment on a game that's made from a Japanese developer. But Final Fantasy XIV's character creator is, while limited by nature of being an MMO, much denser and more robust than World of Warcraft's. And while the heart of Final Fantasy XIV has never been PvP, it's very much existent, and there are people who play Final Fantasy XIV exclusively for PvP. I have friends who only play for PvP. Shep, I don't think you listen to this podcast, but nothing brings me more delight than when Shep signs on to Candace's account and just posts the picture and goes, kill. We're going to talk about...
Attack.
It's really good. They just post a picture. I'll send you some pictures that it's really fucking funny.
Please.
Before I talk about being a new player to Final Fantasy XIV, I want to talk and really reiterate about how dramatic the avalanche of players has been, because I don't think a lot of people can totally conceptualize what this has been like. On July 20th, 2021, Naoki Yoshido, that's Mr. Yoshi P, released a statement and plan for the future of the servers of Final Fantasy XIV. I don't play on a server where there are a ton of streamers, and certainly not massive ones like Asmongold. But since Asmongold's stream, my server has seen a dramatic increase in players. My server used to be quite relaxed, with most areas just populated enough to feel bustling, but never overwhelming. Also, if you want to know what server I play on, you can ask me, but I'm not going to, advertise it, and if I don't know you, I don't know you, so I might not tell you. But if I know you, maybe we can play together. That is no longer the case for my server, though. My Discord crew and I, had a channel where we kept track of funny player names, because it used to be a really kind of fun, rare occurrence, but now we don't really update that channel because you can't walk 2 steps in any area of a game without being bombarded by joke names. They still make me laugh when they're funny and when they're clever, but they've lost a lot of their novelty because of the sheer abundance of them for a solid month. Actually, 2 months now. Oh my god. Time sure does pass.
It sure does.
My server queue time to log in on a weekday night around 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern used to never go over 35 players. Now it is pretty consistently at 60 plus players. That hasn't affected my actual time to log in, but I have also had several instances, especially on weekends and peak times, of trying to log in and being met with a queue that is several hundred people deep. Of, hi, you're number 312 in the line to log in, and it's like, okay, cool. I'm gonna go get a snack while I wait. I understand that all of that is anecdotal, but the people at Square Enix have had to make some pretty significant changes in a short amount of time to ensure quality gameplay and sustainability. If you remember when Final Fantasy 1.0 launched, there were up to 400 server crashes a day. We're not really dealing with server crashes right now because Square Enix is working so hard to make sure that the servers don't crash. I do believe some server crashes have happened, but it's not something where it's happening wildly. I know that Cactuar has been down before for extended periods of time, and by extended periods I mean several minutes, but you know. Those login queue times that I mentioned are a product of multiple people attempting to log in at once. So in North America, servers are able to handle approximately 18,000 simultaneous logins, which is distributed as about 750 people per world. And those are the different instances of that server. That's not 18,000 people being online. That's 18,000 people trying to log in at the same time.
Oh, Jesus. That's too many. Well, wasn't there also a moment where they actually ran out of codes for players?
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, jeez.
You
Oh,
are in that
jeez.
queue until other players log out, essentially. And when the worlds are full like that, players new or old aren't able to make new characters.
No.
Yoshi P in that letter asked that players log out if they're not actively engaged in the game and to avoid creating new characters during peak times. Square also prioritizes their subscribed players, meaning that the login queue was not for a period of time available to free trial players, which I understand sucks, but they want to make sure that the people who have paid for their subscription are able to log into the game. Because if you have people who aren't able to log in for several days, they're able to come to Square Enix and be like, hey, I literally couldn't access the game for 2 days of my free trial. Can I get, for 2 days of my sub, can I get a reimbursement?
Yeah.
They also implemented an auto logout feature earlier than they had anticipated. They were planning for that to come out with like the next patch, but they had to throw it in early. So basically it was like if you were idle for, I think in the European servers, is if you were idle for like 10 or 15 minutes, they automatically logged you out. And in the North American server, if you were idle for 30 minutes, they would kick you out, which I think is generally just a good choice in general.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Why is there a difference in time? Do we know?
Because the European servers were much smaller and at a smaller capacity. They are working to upgrade their European servers, but they were able to upgrade the North American servers more quickly.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Because they've been upgrading in anticipation for Endwalker coming out.
Yes. Okay.
The letter goes on, and at its end, Yoshida apologizes profusely, and Mr. Yoshi P, I know you're not listening, but it is not your fault. Thank you for your service and dedication. I love you. You're great. I have a parasocial relationship with Yoshi P, and I have a lot of respect for him, and he's really fun, and during FanFest, he always cosplays as the new class in the game. It's very fun.
That is delightful.
But like Teese mentioned, there were actually, I think it was a few days that they just stopped selling the game on, I know, the PlayStation Network, because they're like, we can't handle more players. We can't right now. We literally cannot handle them. So they had to stop selling the game because they couldn't have more people playing.
That's some big shit.
Companies never want to turn down money.
Yeah, that's big shit.
This has been wild. It has been unprecedented. We have never seen something like this in the history of online gaming. This didn't happen for World of Warcraft in terms of, players flocking to it. This is very much a first-time thing that people are shocked and stunned by. And even the developers at Square Enix are like, what the fuck is going on? What happened? We don't know why this is happening. There have been talks from fans I know about a want for a server that's just for streamers to try and cut down on the amount of congestion that happens when streamers log on. I don't think that would be a bad idea. I think that would actually be a really good idea for streamers over a certain audience size. I don't know how you would go about verifying that, how you would maintain that, but I do think that's a good idea. All of that said, though, because I understand that, this might be a way that people are getting interested in the game or kind of learning a little about it, I want to take some time to talk about how you can be a good Final Fantasy XIV player as an established player, and how you can be good to new people, and I have some advice for new people who we affectionately call sprouts. Teese, you ready to learn? I know you played a little bit, but I want to kind of share some tips for people.
Okay.
So, new players in Final Fantasy XIV have a small sprout icon next to their name, which is why we call them sprouts. And while you can turn that icon off at any time, it stays by default until you have completed A Realm Reborn and Heavensward, or have played for 160 to 8 hours in the case of people who might buy a story skip. The most important thing in life and in Final Fantasy XIV and in any other MMORPG is to be nice to players regardless of whether they are a sprout, like a new player, or if they are a mentor. Not everyone has a keyboard, and even players with keyboards may not feel comfortable or be able to type in chat, so please don't get upset with them if they don't respond in chat. It's always good etiquette to say hello or type a quick greeting emote in the chat of any dungeon, trial, or raid. There are like little scroll through options if you play on a controller that'll allow you to auto populate that in your chat. And there's also a ton of resources on making macros for that kind of thing if, again, you don't have a keyboard or if using a keyboard is something that's not accessible to you. If it is your first time doing something in Final Fantasy XIV or in any MMO, I highly recommend that you let your party know. I personally prefer to watch guide videos before going into anything new, but I still let my party know that it's my first time doing something so that they can understand if I'm slow, confused, or if I don't understand a mechanic. If you are looking for visual guides a la videos, I really recommend MTQCapture. She's delightful. Her videos are succinct. I think the longest I've ever seen one is 12 minutes, and it was for like really late game stuff. Most of the time it's like 5 or 10 minutes, and I put it on, and I watch it, and then I go into the dungeon, and I'm like, hi guys, it's my first time. But I totally understand too, if you don't want to spoil yourself on the amazing visuals that you get, just tell people that it's your first time. No one's going to be mad at you. If anybody is, please let me know. I'll come fight them for you. It is okay to ask questions, and it is okay to die. If you die in Final Fantasy XIV, it's okay. Dying is a part of it, and there is a reason that the healers are there to bring you back. I have seen different opinions on what is the best class to start as. Just do whatever feels like the most fun to you because that's what you're going to enjoy. But it is okay if you die. And if you keep dying, it's okay. If somebody gets mad at you or gets frustrated with you or is mean to you in chat, once again, please come tell me. I'm your dad now and I will talk with them for you.
I'll call their moms.
Mm-hmm. It's like school and the teacher calls and it's like, I'm going to call home. I'm going to call home and I'm going to tell your mom what you're doing. And you'll, oh, no. If other players do seem clipped or abrupt in chat, though, I want you to know, and it's important to know in general, that they're also playing the game at the same time and they're trying to be quick. They're usually not upset or angry with you. So if somebody is typing something like provoke or aggro, they're not mad at you. They're just trying to give you a reminder. If they are repeatedly typing it in the chat and they are escalating to all caps, they might be a little upset with you. Or they might just be trying to get your attention. New and returning players in Final Fantasy XIV have access to what's called the Novice Network, where they can ask any question they need in-game of game mentors or people who are in the Novice Network with them. If you are too shy or a little embarrassed to ask your question, the internet is your friend, but I promise you, the people in the Novice Network have seen it all. And when I got back into playing the game after like a few months of not playing it, I had to ask Novice Network how to open my crafting menu. You just have to hit a button. It's okay though. They get it. They thought it was like a much more complicated problem. They're like, did you like hide it in your UI? I'm like, no, I literally just don't know how to open it. They're like, hit N. And I was like, okay. Wow, thank you.
Yay.
While the little crown symbol in Final Fantasy XIV next to somebody's name marks them as a mentor, unfortunately, that doesn't always mean that they are knowledgeable or ready to help. If you're a mentor and you're listening to this, I'm sorry to rag on you. I've just been burned too many times. Many people will get mentor status for the achievement or the visual pride of that crown. I think that's kind of silly, but again, please ask your party for help if you need it. Don't put stake in people because of certain icons. Everybody is there to help and make sure, hopefully, that you have a good time. As long as you are having fun and being kind to other players, there's really no wrong way to play Final Fantasy XIV. I would personally recommend against skipping the story because that's a huge part of what makes the experience of Final Fantasy. A Realm Reborn can be really dry, but I promise you, it is worth it. It is a long wait, though, and I talked to Nika about this last night because she's relatively new to the game, and I was like, what is something you wish you'd known going in? She was like, I wish I'd known how long A Realm Reborn is. Because it's long. Because it's the base game. It's taking you from levels 1 all the way up to 50. So you're going to be in there for a while. Take your time. Enjoy it. The voice acting, I promise you, does get better. The entire crew gets recast because there was a weird studio changeover when they went to Heavensward, so Alphino will not sound like a little old man trapped in a 15-year-old's body forever. Sam Riegel, I love you, but oh my god, why did they cast you in that role? You will also level really speedily and consistently if you just do main story on one job for A Realm Reborn, for all the games pretty much. That'll keep you at pace. I wouldn't worry too much about diversifying your different jobs, but again, play how you want to play. Try things out. Test them out. The game is really open and accessible about being like, you're level 10 and you don't like what job you're doing? Cool. Do you want to try being a ninja? Okay, let's get you started on that. I don't remember if ninja is a starter class, but, you know, same rule applies. Go be a conjurer or something. With this, if you want to get attached to and develop your character, your Warrior of Light, then I would say you should put some thought and care into their name. Whether that is just taking something from the random lore-compliant randomizer, or coming up with something on your own, or, you know, pulling a name from a character in something that you really like. You will probably find it harder to connect with your character if you name them Leroy Jenkins. Maybe not, but that has just been my experience from people I know who then get kind of like, oh, you guys actually have backstories for your Warriors of Light? And we're like, yeah. And they're like, oh, that's cool. And it's like, yeah, come join us. Also, if I will say, if you make a character and you don't like their name after a while, or if you did make a joke name, you can change it. You can pay $10 and you can change your character name. Square Enix is really cool about that. Not everyone wants to play Final Fantasy for the story or combat. Be understanding of that. There is literally a person who sped through the tutorial quests in Final Fantasy XIV to get access to the casino area so they could play Mahjong. All they do is play Mahjong in this game. For a very long time, apparently Final Fantasy XIV was the only good digital Mahjong client, and it's completely free for them to play. Everyone wants to know how much of the casino currency that they have. All they do is play Mahjong day and night, and I think it's fucking incredible.
I'm learning so much.
Yeah.
Cockroach Caddy, if you're out there, I miss you so much, King. One day.
You can come back at any time, Teese.
But I don't think I could be Cockroach Caddy anymore. I'm too afraid of those pirate ship towns. It was so scary. I couldn't understand anything they said. And there's no cockroaches in game, so...
No, but there are bugs.
But it's not the same. It's not the same.
I personally have roughly a month of playtime in Final Fantasy XIV at this point, which means a month worth of hours. Not just like, I've been playing for a month. But I've been playing on and off for a few years now, and I can only count 3 occurrences in which I've had a genuinely bad experience with other players. The most recent was literally the other week, and it was a mentor player who I'd later discovered had been playing since 1.0 and had the audacity to harass everyone in chat and say, I bet you're all World of Warcraft players.
Ew.
Don't do that. That was the mildest thing this person said. We ended up reporting them then because they were really, really terrible and they were actively bullying people. But don't do that. Don't gatekeep. If you love something, there is joy in it being shared. I see a lot of like in-chat arguments about whether Final Fantasy XIV is better than World of Warcraft and vice versa. It doesn't help anyone. That's not fun. Also, don't have those in public chat where everyone else is subjected to reading that. I understand that you're on free trial, but if you want to have... Well, you can't use Moogle Mail either if you're a baby. I don't know, exchange Discord names and chat there. I don't want to pop in to do my dailies and see you fucking arguing about... This is not preschool. Also, unrelated and not in my notes, but Final Fantasy XIV I think is only rated T for teen, which means there are teenagers playing the game. So please only say things that are appropriate in chat as if like a 13-year-old were present. Some people say some really wild stuff sometimes. And, you know, obviously there are things where it's like you're joking. But I've had people make some really gross jokes before. And I've also heard of people harassing people who choose to play as female avatars. Leave people alone. That's a real person playing behind that. Be nice to people and respect them.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say that I think makes playing any MMO really daunting is that they do not function like other video games. They have their own rules and structures, and they can be incredibly overwhelming. So if you want to get into one, take it easy. Don't rush yourself. Take time to read tutorial menus. There are tons and tons of videos out there on getting started in any MMO. But you can take your time. You can optimize things slowly as you learn. You're going to get bombarded by menus. There's a lot of them. It's okay to breathe and just take a moment, take a break. You don't have to play at anyone else's pace but your own. But at the end of the day, there is an entire community that is excited to welcome you and play the game with you, and you will find your group. It's always going to be more fun with friends. That's our episode. Next week, I know you're probably tired of hearing me talk for the majority of the time 2 weeks in a row, but next week...
It's my turn. It's my turn?
Teese is going to tell us something so exciting, and I'm very excited for it.
So excited.
Here's your hint. All right, that was your hint. It's just going to be... Blomp.
That's all I'm telling you, that's all what people need. They'll hear that first note, and it's over. I'm so excited. This is such a T-Score episode. I'm pleased. I'm pleased as punch.
Thank you so much for sticking around until the end of the episode. We really appreciate you guys, and just listening helps us out so much. I don't know. I'm continually amazed by the numbers that this podcast is doing, and every week we're getting new listeners and new subscribers, and that's really, really exciting. I hope you guys enjoyed the bonus episode. It was a lot of fun to learn about that and to have Teese tell me about Neopets. If you want to help out the pod, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or share the podcast with your friend. If you want to get access to bonus episodes early and exclusive content like show and tell, book club, all sorts of fun stuff and polls, that's over on Patreon. We are on Patreon and Ko-fi at Authors Note Pod. You can find all information about finding us on social media or reaching out to the show at authorsnotepod.com. My name is Cass, and you can find me across the internet at Valhethella. That's VALHETHELLA. Teese, where can people find you at?
You can find me at Vicuña, that's VICUNAD. You could also find me on the website Fandom Spotlight, where I do some fun little writing for them once a week. My most recent article is about the new What We Do in the Shadows season. So give that a little check out. Give that a little read and make a little comment maybe. Our theme music was done by James Yaiullo. You could find him on Bandcamp under James Y. And Cass, who did our cover art?
Our cover art was done by the wonderful and incredible Nyaliest. You can find her on Twitter at Nyaliest. It's NYALLIEST. She's also featured on Aether Cryptids as Rat Baby in Final Fantasy XIV. Our fun little listener corner, our little library sit and chat will return next week. This week, Teese, you must ask me a question.
Cass, who's your favorite
Did you forget the question you have to ask?
Oh, fuck. I was ready to ask you a different question. Damn it. Okay. Cass, what's a series that you think should have a fandom?
No, that's not the question.
Fucking A. What's the question now? What's something you think should have a fandom? Just that?
What's something you think
What's something you think should have a fandom? Yeah. Hard to answer on the spot, huh?
I really like the fur that sprouts from between animals' toes. I really like their toe fur, and I think fans of that should be called toe fur graces. You know, like the actor from that 70s show. Yeah. Topher Grace. Join my Topher fandom. Fellow Topher Graces.
Topher fandom, grab your scissors.
No!
Snip, snip.
Bye.
You never told me about the brothels.